Oops. Did I just push you, Gramps? My bad.
Floor's wet, son. Be careful.
Son, the janitor calls me son. Hear that, everybody?
I meant no disrespect.
Watch the floor, old man. That's all you're good for.
Please, I have work to finish.
Then work. Shine my belt, janitor.
I clean floors, not belts.
You'll clean whatever I say. 12 wins, old man. 12. Yeah. What do you have?
A wet floor and a long memory.
Film this. The mop guy thinks he's tough. Smile for the camera, Grandpa.
No, sir. Floors are just slippery when you don't watch your step.
I never slip.
Everyone slips. Some just haven't met the floor yet.
Kyle Bennett laughed, 12 wins deep and certain, never knowing the janitor he shoved for fun had trained 3 national champions. Have you ever been laughed at by someone who had no idea who you really were?
5 in the morning, Columbus, Ohio. The lights of Ironclad Performance Center buzzed awake one row at a time. Otis Foster unlocked the side door the way he had for 9 years, with a soft click and a quiet nod to the empty room. He filled his bucket. He measured the soap with the care of a chemist. Then he mopped the training floor in long, even arcs that never crossed their own path. Most people clean a floor. Otis read it. Every scuff told him who trained sloppy, who dragged a tired foot, who favored a bad knee. He knew this gym better than the men who owned it. He was 68, lean as wire rope, with white stubble and hands the color of worn leather. He moved slowly, but never clumsily. Watch him long enough and strange details surfaced. He never stood with his weight on both heels. He folded his cleaning rags in perfect thirds, corners sharp as paper cranes. When a barbell rolled off a rack one morning, his hand caught it before his eyes seemed to move. A trainer blinked and laughed it off. "Lucky catch," he said. Otis only nodded. Luck was a word he let other people keep. Home was a small brick house on the east side, paid off and quiet. Inside, the shelves held trophies of an invisible life, not cups or medals, absences. A photograph lay face down on the mantel, dusted weekly, never lifted. In the bedroom closet sat a wooden box with a brass lock. The key hung on a chain around his neck, under his shirt, against his heart. 15 years, and he had not opened it once. Some nights he sat with the box on his knees. He never turned the key. He just listened to the house breathe. Kyle Bennett trained at Ironclad like the place owed him rent. 24 years old, a black belt, 12 straight regional wins, and a highlight reel he watched more than film of his opponents. The talent was real. That was the problem. Talent without humility is gasoline without a tank. His kicks cracked pads like gunfire, and every crack drew his eyes to the mirror. Members orbited him. Sponsors texted him. 100,000 followers replayed his knockouts and called him the future. Kyle agreed with them. Loudly. Often. Behind Kyle stood his father, Preston Bennett, a real estate developer whose name sat on half the new towers downtown. Preston wrote the largest sponsorship check Ironclad had ever cashed. The gym's manager, Troy Sullivan, framed that check like a diploma. Troy had 2 rules: keep the equipment clean and keep the Bennetts happy. Whenever Kyle's jokes turned cruel, Troy studied his clipboard until the laughing stopped. He was not a bad man, people said, just a man whose spine bent toward money. Megan Brooks worked the front desk and saw everything the cameras saw. She liked Otis. He remembered birthdays. He left the break room cleaner than he found it. One Tuesday evening,
She watched a 9-year-old from the kids' class punching air in the corner, all elbows and frustration. The boy had stayed late because his mother's shift ran long. His stance was a mess, feet crossed, chin high, balance leaking everywhere. The coaches had gone home. Nobody was watching. Nobody but the janitor. Otis passed with his mop and paused. He tapped the boy's back foot with the handle. He turned the boy's hips 2 inches. He lowered the boy's chin with 1 finger. Then he walked on as if nothing had happened. The boy reset and threw the same punch. It snapped like a whip cracking in an empty room. Megan froze at the front desk, phone ringing, forgotten in her hand. The boy stared at his own fist. Otis just pushed his bucket into the dark hallway, humming something low and old. And for the first time, somebody asked the question that would unravel everything. Who taught the floor guy to build a fighter with 2 fingers? Saturday came loud. Kyle Bennett had just taken his 13th straight win, a second-round knockout across town, and he returned to Ironclad with the trophy and an audience. 40 members crowded the mats. Phones came out before his jacket did. He replayed his knockout on the gym's big screen twice. Then he got bored. Bored champions go looking for entertainment, and entertainment was pushing a mop along the far wall. What happened next took 11 seconds. Cameras caught all of it. Kyle strolled over, grinning at his followers, and shoved the old man with both hands. Otis hit the floor hard. His bucket toppled with him, and gray mop water soaked his shirt, his pants, the side of his face. The gym exploded with laughter. "Relax, Gramps. It's just for fun. Somebody get the janitor some floaties." Otis lay in the spreading puddle for 1 long breath. Then he rose, joint by joint, the way old men rise when pride is the heaviest thing they lift. He did not look at Kyle. He picked up the bucket. He righted the wet floor sign. And he started mopping the same spot again, in long, even arcs, while 40 phones filmed his soaked back. Only one person in the room wasn't laughing. The 9-year-old from the kids' class stood by the cubbies, gym bag on his shoulder, watching the man who had fixed his stance get treated like a joke. Otis caught the boy's eyes for half a second. Then he looked away, because some things hurt worse than a wet shirt. By 8 that night, the clip was everywhere. Kyle posted it with a laughing caption, "Mop Man down." 200,000 views before midnight. Strangers stitched it, mocked the old man's fall, slowed his face for comedy. In the comments, exactly 4 people asked if he was okay. Across town, in a small brick house, Otis Foster sat on the edge of his bed. His wet uniform hung over the tub. The wooden box rested on his knees. For 15 years the key had stayed warm against his chest and cold to its purpose. Tonight, his thumb traced the brass lock once, twice. Then, slowly, for the first time since the funeral, Otis Foster turned the key. The box held 3 things. A black belt, worn soft and gray at the edges from 10,000 classes. A photograph of 4 people smiling under a banner that read National Championships. And a small phone, years out of date, kept charged by a habit Otis never explained to anyone. He looked at all 3 for a long time. He touched none of them. At 2 in the morning, he closed the lid, locked it, and hung the key back around his neck. Kyle Bennett woke up famous. Not fight famous, internet famous, which is louder and hungrier. Mop Man Down crossed 2 million views in 3 days. His follower count jumped by 60,000. A supplement brand slid into his messages with an offer. Kyle scrolled the numbers in bed, grinning, and learned the oldest lesson of the algorithm. Cruelty performs. His knockouts took 8 weeks of training camp. The janitor clip took 11 seconds. So when his manager asked what was next, Kyle didn't say a title fight. He said, "Give the people a sequel." The sequels came all week. Monday, Otis found his supply cart locked inside the sauna, handles burning hot. Tuesday, somebody dumped a full tub of protein powder across the lobby he had just finished. Kyle filmed the old man kneeling in the white dust. Wednesday brought a new game. Kyle blocked the hallway and wouldn't move until Otis bowed. "Bow to the champ, Gramps. It's tradition." Otis bowed, small and slow, eyes down. The camera loved it. The followers loved it more. Each clip ended the same way, with Kyle's laughing face and a caption about respect. Megan took it to Troy Sullivan twice. Twice, Troy studied his clipboard. "Boys blow off steam," he said. "Otis hasn't complained." That part was true. Otis never complained. But Megan had started doing something quiet at the front desk. Every night, before the security system wiped its footage, she copied the day's files onto a silver hard drive she kept in her car. She didn't know why, yet. She just knew somebody should. Thursday night, Otis sat in his truck in the gym parking lot, too tired to drive. He took out the small, outdated phone from the box, one saved voicemail. He had paid the carrier for years to keep that number alive. His thumb knew the path in the dark. "Hey, Dad, it's me. We're gassing up outside Dayton. Be there by 6. Coach Foster and Champion Foster? That's gonna look crazy on one trophy. Love you. Watch the door. I'm bringing it home." A 19-year-old voice, bright as morning. Otis listened twice. He did not cry. He had done his crying in rooms this town never saw. He pressed save, the way he always pressed save, and went home. By Friday, the numbers dipped. The internet was getting bored, and Kyle could feel it like a dropping temperature. Pranks were appetizers. The audience wanted a main course. That night, he posted a poll to his followers. Should the janitor fight me? 91% said yes. Kyle stared at the result with a strange heat in his chest. Somewhere, under the grin, in a room of himself he never visited, a small voice asked why an old man's calm bothered him this much. He muted it. Saturday afternoon, the gym was packed for open mats. Kyle waited until the room was full. Then he killed the music. "Everybody, gather up! Special event!" He dragged a chair to the center and stood on it, phone lights finding him like stage beams. "Ironclad, give it up for the real star of my page, Mop Man himself." Laughter rolled. 40 cameras turned to the far wall, where Otis stood with his cart, gray water going still in the bucket. Megan, at the desk, quietly angled security camera 3. Kyle hopped down and crossed the floor. "Oops, did I just shove you, Gramps? My bad." The push was lighter this time, staged for the lens. Otis steadied his cart. "Floor's wet, son. Be careful." "Careful? Hit me, old man. Right here. Free shot." "I don't fight, sir." "Of course not. Mops don't fight back, do they?" "Please, let me finish my work." "Get on the mat. 60 seconds with me, or kneel and shine my belt." "I'm 68 years old, son." "Then you'll break easy. Swing at me. I'll close my eyes." Phones pressed closer. Somebody chanted, "Fight," and the chant caught. "Film this! The janitor is scared! Say it, Gramps! Say you're scared!" Kyle peeled $500 from a money clip and slapped it on the ring apron. $500 says you can't touch me, old man. Keep your money. Buy yourself a soft mattress. A mattress? Why? Because everyone falls, son. Some just haven't met the floor yet. The gym went strange and quiet. the way rooms do when a script stops being followed. Kyle blinked, then laughed louder to cover the silence. Tomorrow, noon, Mop Man versus the Champ. 60 seconds. Be here. The crowd roared back to life, and the moment was content again. Safe and shareable. Troy Sullivan appeared at the edge of the mats, took one look at the money on the apron, and walked back into his office. Megan watched Otis push his cart toward the supply room. His hands were steady, his arcs stayed even. Only his jaw had changed, set like a door finally closing. In the supply room, Otis sat on an upturned crate among the bleach and the spare mats. He pulled out his phone, the new one, the one with a calendar. Tomorrow's date stared back at him in small gray letters. June 14th. His chest tightened around a 15-year-old wound. June 14th was the day the state troopers had knocked on his door with their hats in their hands. The day a silver Honda never made it past Dayton. Of all the days that boy could have picked for his circus, Kyle Bennett had chosen the anniversary of Caleb Foster's death. 60 seconds, the boy had said. Otis closed the calendar and stared at the wall for a long time. Sunday came up gray and soft. Before the sun cleared the trees, Otis stood in Greenlawn Cemetery with 2 folding chairs and 1 cup of coffee. He set a chair by each stone. Ruth Foster, beloved wife. Caleb Foster, 19 forever. Otis drank half the coffee and poured the rest into the grass. They want me on the mat today, baby, he told Ruth Stone. On his day. The wind moved the maples. He turned to Caleb Stone and sat a long while. I'm not going to hurt that boy, he said finally. I'm going to introduce him to himself. From the truck, he made 1 phone call, a number he had not dialed in 6 years. It rang twice. Mason, it's Coach. Silence, then a breath that sounded like a man sitting down. Coach Foster. My God. Noon today, Ironclad Performance Center. I need a witness. A witness to what? 60 seconds. At home, Otis opened the closet and took down a canvas bag stiff with disuse. He folded his old gi into it, white gone cream with age. He left the black belt in the box. He would not wear rank against a child. Defense only, he promised the empty house. Not 1 strike. By 11:30, the parking lot of Ironclad was already full, and the internet was waiting for a beating. It would get a lesson instead. Noon arrived like a held breath. Inside Ironclad, 300 people pressed around the main mat, and thousands more floated in Kyle's live stream, numbers climbing in the corner of his screen. Somebody had printed a banner, the Janitor Challenge. Kyle bounced in his corner in a fresh team jacket, rolling his neck, playing to the cameras. The $500 sat under a water bottle at the mat's edge. Troy Sullivan stood where managers stand when they want to be seen and not blamed. At 1 minute past 12, the crowd parted. Laughing, phones high. Otis Foster walked through in a cream-colored gi, no belt, feet bare. The laughter stuttered. Something about the way he walked confused the room. No shuffle now. Each step landed quiet and exact, weight pouring from foot to foot like water finding level. In the back row, a broad-shouldered man in a gray hoodie lowered his coffee and went very still. Nice pajamas, Gramps, Kyle called, arms wide. You get those from the Lost and Found? They were a gift. 60 seconds. Try to survive. 60 seconds, Otis agreed. Try to listen. Listen to what? Your own breathing, son. It's about to get loud. Troy, pushed forward as referee, raised an awkward hand and dropped it. Somebody hit a phone timer. 60 seconds began. Kyle came out fast, feinted a jab, and fired his trademark right cross, the one that had folded 13 men. It hit nothing. Otis was simply not where the fist arrived, his head off the line by 4 inches. No more, no less. The gym heard it before it understood it. The whisper of bare feet on vinyl. The snap of Kyle's sleeve cutting empty air. A low hook whistled through the space where an old man's ribs had been a half-second earlier. A head kick swept over a head that had already bowed politely beneath it. Otis never blocked. Blocking is for people who arrive late. He turned, shifted, breathed, and the mat under him made almost no sound at all. 20 seconds in, nobody in the building was laughing. Kyle's breathing got loud, just as promised. He swung harder, which made him slower, which made the air he hit feel heavier. In the live stream chat, the jokes were dying mid-sentence. Someone typed, "Is this real?" Someone else typed, "The janitor is a ghost." The view counter rolled past 80,000. Kyle heard none of it. All he heard was his own lungs and the soft, patient slide of 2 bare feet that would not stay still. At 31 seconds, Kyle stopped boxing and shot for a double-leg takedown, diving at the old man's knees. What happened next would be replayed 9 million times in slow motion. Otis dropped his hips, caught the incoming shoulders, and turned. Just turned. Kyle's own speed did the rest, lifting him over a quiet hip and laying him flat on his back. The sound of the landing went through the gym floor like a dropped piano. 300 people inhaled at once. Nobody exhaled. Kyle stared at the ceiling, lungs empty, pride emptier. The old man stood over him, hands open, offering to help him up. "Breathe, son. You're fine. The floor caught you." Kyle slapped the hand away and scrambled to his feet. At the front desk, Megan Brooks had stopped pretending to work. Her hands were pressed over her mouth. On her monitor, security camera 3 recorded the wide angle nobody's phone could see. The whole mat, both men, every step. She glanced at the red recording light and made a decision that would matter more than anyone knew. She hit protect on the file. The second fall came at 44 seconds. Kyle charged blind, both hands reaching, all technique abandoned, just 200 pounds of humiliation looking for a throat. Otis stepped off the line, guided the reaching arm past its target, and let the boy's momentum write its own ending. Kyle hit the mat face down, slid a foot and a half, and stopped at the feet of his own live stream tripod. His camera looked down at him. 80,000 strangers looked with it. 10 seconds left. Kyle rose with something broken loose behind his eyes. He grabbed a metal water bottle from the mat's edge and swung it at the old man's skull. The crowd screamed. Otis swayed inside the arc, trapped the swinging arm, and turned his hip one final time. But this throw was different. Halfway through the fall, Kyle's head was aimed at the concrete lip beyond the mat. Otis's palm shot out and cupped the back of the boy's neck. He pulled him in. He gave the fall back to the soft vinyl. He laid Kyle down like something fragile. The phone timer sang. 60 seconds. Finished. Otis Foster had not thrown a single strike. He stood in the center of the mat, breathing the way men breathe in libraries, and bowed to the boy gasping at his feet. Then he picked up his canvas bag, left the $500 untouched under the water bottle, and walked toward the locker room through a silence you could have framed. Kyle stayed down for a moment, staring at the lights. 60 seconds earlier, he had been a champion. Now he was a meme being born in real time, and somewhere in his chest, under the rage, lived a feeling he could not name yet. It felt almost like awe. He buried it fast and reached for his anger instead. Anger was familiar. Anger had a father.
At the edge of the crowd, the 9-year-old started clapping. Alone at first. Then the kids' class joined. Then their parents. Then the room. A rolling thunder of hands that Kyle would hear in his sleep. The man in the gray hoodie did not clap. Mason Cole just watched the cream-colored back disappear down the hallway and whispered to nobody, "He's still perfect." By 6 that evening, the internet had a new obsession. The full live stream. The slow-motion breakdowns. The freeze frame of an old hand cradling the neck of the boy who had swung steel at him. Martial arts channels dissected his footwork frame by frame and came back with the same stunned verdict. This is not luck. This is mastery you cannot buy. The clip crossed 5 million views before midnight under one question, repeated in 40 languages. Who is the janitor? 40 floors above downtown Columbus, Preston Bennett watched his son slide across a mat on a phone screen, face down, in front of the whole world. He watched it twice. He did not call Kyle. He did not ask if the boy was hurt. He scrolled to a name his money kept on speed dial, a name that had buried lawsuits, rivals, and inconvenient stories alike. Victoria Sterling answered on the first ring. "Counselor," Preston said quietly, "I need you to destroy a janitor." Victoria Sterling did not take cases. She took territory. Monday morning, she sat in Preston Bennett's glass office with the live stream playing on a wall screen, watching an old man embarrass her newest retainer's son. She watched it without expression, the way surgeons look at X-rays. "Your son challenged him publicly," she said. 300 witnesses. He swung a metal bottle. This is unwinnable. Preston slid a folder across the desk. "Then we don't fight the truth," he said. "We replace it." The folder held the architecture of a lie. A medical report, real enough, showing Kyle's sprained shoulder and bruised vertebrae from 3 uncontrolled falls. A statement, drafted and waiting, in which Kyle remembered being threatened. And a strategy built on one simple fact about the internet. Nobody watches the whole video. "We sue for assault and battery," Sterling said, reading. "Civil court. We claim the janitor is a trained fighter who concealed his skills, provoked a young athlete, and injured him in front of children." She looked up. "I'll need the gym's cooperation." Preston smiled. "I own the gym's cooperation." Kyle sat through the meeting saying almost nothing, his arm in a sling he had been told to wear everywhere. The sling was theater. His shoulder ached, but it worked. What didn't work was sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's palm catching his neck, soft as a parent's, pulling his skull away from the concrete. The man he was about to destroy had protected him mid-throw. Kyle knew it. The footage knew it. "Sign here," Sterling said, and Kyle Bennett picked up the pen. The new video dropped Wednesday. 90 seconds, expertly cut. Gone was the shove, the bet, the taunting, the swing of the steel bottle. What remained was an old man in a strange gi throwing a college-aged athlete onto his neck 3 times, while children watched from the front row. The caption wrote itself: "Hidden fighter assaults local champion." By Thursday, the local news ran it with a tilted headline: 68-year-old janitor with mysterious combat training injures young athlete at family gym. The anchors used the word disturbing twice. The comment sections turned like weather. The same internet that had crowned him on Sunday burned him by Friday. Why was a trained killer mopping floors around kids? What was he hiding? Who hires these people?
The 5 million views of the truth were buried under 30 million views of the lie. A man with no social media accounts cannot answer 30 million views. Otis didn't try. He went to work at 5 in the morning and found his key no longer fit the side door. Troy Sullivan met him in the parking lot with an envelope and a speech he had practiced badly. Liability issue, Otis. Nothing personal. The board, the insurance, you understand. Otis looked at the envelope. 9 years folded into 2 weeks of severance. The Bennetts are also discussing your pension eligibility, Troy added, eyes on the asphalt. Their lawyer found some paperwork issues. It could all go away, though. He lowered his voice. They want a public apology. On camera. Say you provoked the boy. Say you're sorry. Preston makes the lawsuit disappear. You keep your retirement. For a long moment, the only sound was a flag rope clinking against its pole. I mopped that floor 9 years, Otis said at last. Never missed a corner. You tell Mr. Bennett my knees don't bend that direction. He handed the envelope back unopened and walked to his truck. Troy stood there, holding 2 weeks of money like a man holding his own resignation letter. Not everyone believed the new story. The mother of the 9-year-old called the gym to defend him and got voicemail. A handful of members posted the original live stream, pointing at the shove, the bet, the bottle. Their posts gathered hundreds of views against Sterling's millions. Truth was present at the battle. It was just outnumbered. That afternoon, Troy called Megan into his office and closed the door. The lawsuit named the gym's security system. Sterling's people want the footage retention policy enforced, he said, not meeting her eyes. 30 days, automatic deletion. Make sure the system is, compliant. Megan understood perfectly. Sunday's wide-angle footage, the footage showing the shove, the bottle, the catch, was 11 days from a hearing and 1 click from gone. Of course, she said. That night she sat in her car with the silver hard drive in her lap, hands shaking, and made 2 more copies. Kyle stopped posting that week. His comment sections had become a war he couldn't win, half mockery, half worship. At dinner, his father talked about the lawsuit the way other fathers talk about football, loud and certain. Kyle pushed food around his plate. He caught my neck, he said once, quietly. Preston didn't look up. The footage will be gone by Friday, he said. Eat. The summons arrived Saturday by certified mail. Bennett versus Foster. Damages sought, $800,000. Otis read it twice at his kitchen table, then set it down next to a stack of bills and his pension statement. The math was simple and merciless. Even winning would bankrupt him. Lawyers cost more than janitors earn. That night, the old doubts came back wearing new clothes. 15 years ago, he had walked away because the Matts took his son. Now he had stepped on one for 60 seconds, and it was taking the rest. His house, his name, his quiet. Maybe the lesson was the same one, repeating until he learned it. Everything he loved, the fighting life, eventually collected. He took out the old phone that night and held his thumb over the saved voicemail. For the first time in 15 years, he didn't press play. He was afraid of what he'd hear in it now. Not his son's voice, his own failure underneath it. He set the phone face down on the nightstand, turned off the light, and lay in the dark with his eyes open. The hearing was set for a Tuesday, 11 days out. Sterling fed the press all week. An anonymous source said the janitor had a violent past. Another source wondered why no dojo in Ohio had records of him. The story wrote itself into shape. The shape money wanted. By Monday night, the man who had refused to throw a single punch was the most hated old man in Columbus. He was sitting in the kitchen that Monday night, alone with cold coffee and the summons, when headlights swept the window. Then a second pair. Then a third. Car doors closed in the driveway. 1, 2, 3. Unhurried. Otis rose slowly. 68 years old, sued, fired, and famous for all the wrong reasons. He had no idea who would come for him at 10 at night. The knock, when it came, was soft, almost respectful. He opened the door. 3 people stood on the porch in the June dark, and 15 years stood behind them. Mason Cole, shoulders filling the doorway, Sarah Whitfield, silver medal posture, ears flattened by 2 decades of judo. Dominic Hayes, tailored coat, gym chain logo on his cap. Nobody spoke. Then Sarah stepped forward and hugged the old man so hard the porch light shook. "You stopped answering letters, Coach," she said into his shoulder. "So we stopped writing. We came instead." They sat in his kitchen until 2 in the morning. Mason had flown in for the challenge and stayed for the lawsuit. He had called the others the night the doctored video dropped. Otis tried twice to send them home. "This is my mess." Dominic set his coffee down. "Coach, you taught us the first rule of the corner. Nobody fights alone." Otis looked at 3 faces he had built from nothing, and for once, the old man ran out of arguments. Tuesday. The hearing room was small, but the story was not, so the hallway outside filled with cameras. Judge Harlan Pierce, a careful man with reading glasses and no patience for theater, called the room to order. Preston Bennett sat behind his lawyer like a man who had already read the ending. Kyle sat beside him in the sling, eyes down. Otis came alone, in his church suit, hands folded, representing himself because he could afford nothing else. Victoria Sterling worked the room like a scalpel. She played the 90-second cut on a courtroom screen. She used the phrase concealed combat training 4 times. "Mr. Foster, what belt do you hold?" "I hold no belt, ma'am." "What rank have you held?" "Rank fades when you stop wearing it." "Answer the question." "Black belt, 3 disciplines." Murmurs. She turned to the judge. "A man with that training is a weapon, Your Honor. A weapon worked beside children for 9 years without disclosure." Otis said nothing. Slow answers, short answers, just as the truth comes when it isn't performing. "Why did a martial arts master spend 9 years pushing a mop, Mr. Foster? What were you hiding from?" For the first time, the old man's hands tightened on the table. The room leaned in. Even Pierce looked up from his notes. Otis opened his mouth, closed it again. Some doors don't open in public. Sterling smiled at the silence and let it do her work. No further questions. And that was when the doors at the back of the courtroom actually opened. Mason Cole walked up the aisle in a state athletics jacket, and half the room recognized him before he reached the front. 3-time national middleweight champion, current head coach of the Ohio State team. He asked to be heard as a character witness, and Judge Pierce, curiosity beating procedure, allowed it. Mason raised his right hand, took the oath, and looked straight at the press row. "My name is Mason Cole. The man you've been calling a hidden threat is Otis Foster. We called him the Quiet Hand. He trained me from a 14-year-old nobody to a national champion. He also trained Sarah Whitfield and Dominic Hayes." He paused. "Stand up, guys." 2 people rose in the gallery. A murmur became a roar that Pierce had to gavel down. Sarah Whitfield, Olympic silver, 2 world titles. Dominic Hayes, undefeated kickboxer, owner of 11 gyms across 3 states. Sterling was on her feet, objecting to relevance. Pierce peered over his glasses. "Counselor, you spent 40 minutes arguing this man's training history. His training history just stood up. Overruled." "You asked what he was hiding from," Mason said, voice dropping. "I'll answer it because he never will. 15 years ago, Coach had a 4th student, the best of us, his son, Caleb." Otis went very still at his table. Caleb was 19. He died in a crash on the highway outside Dayton, driving to the national championships his father spent 10 years preparing him for. Coach buried his boy on a Friday. He locked his belt in a box. He never coached again. Mason looked at the old man, and his voice cracked on the next sentence anyway. He didn't quit fighting because he was dangerous. He quit forgiving himself. There's a difference. At his table, Otis Foster looked down at his open hands, the hands that had taped Caleb's wrists before every tournament, the hands that had carried the casket. Nobody in that room had ever seen the old man cry, and they didn't now. But his shoulders dropped, finally, like a man setting down something he had carried up a very long hill. The room had gone quiet in a way courtrooms rarely manage. A reporter in the 3rd row wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Kyle Bennett stared at the old man's back, and the sling on his arm suddenly weighed 100 pounds. Then the 2nd door opened. Megan Brooks came up the aisle holding a silver hard drive like it was made of glass. She had quit Ironclad that morning by text message. Under oath, she told the court about the deleted retention policy and about the copies she had made anyway. Pierce ordered the footage played. The full Sunday. The shove that started it. The $500 slapped down. The chance. The steel bottle swinging at a gray head. And then came the frame the judge asked to see twice. The old man's palm catching the back of Kyle Bennett's neck, pulling him away from the concrete, laying him down on the soft vinyl like something worth saving. When the lights came up, nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. On the screen, frozen, an old man held a boy's head an inch above ruin. Sterling's 90-second story had just been beaten by its own missing footage. In the gallery, the mother of the 9-year-old stood and said, loud enough for the record, "That man is the only adult in that gym who ever watched out for my son." Pierce let it stand. Sterling asked for a recess. The judge gave her 10 minutes. It took 4. Whatever was said at the plaintiff's table was said through teeth, and when the room reconvened, Victoria Sterling stood with a face like wet cement. "Your Honor, my client moves to withdraw the complaint, with prejudice." Pierce removed his glasses. "I imagined he might." He looked at Preston Bennett for a long, unhurried moment. "This court also imagines the city attorney will enjoy the question of who edited that video." Withdrawal granted. The gavel came down like a clean throw. The room began to move. Reporters racing for the hallway, Preston already barking at Sterling. Otis sat motionless, Sarah's hand on his shoulder. 15 years of silence broken open in a single morning. And then, over the noise, a chair scraped. Kyle Bennett was on his feet. He pulled the sling over his head, dropped it on the table, and said 5 words nobody expected. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Pierce could have refused. The case was withdrawn, the morning already historic, but he looked at the boy standing without his sling and nodded once. Kyle didn't go to the witness stand. He turned to face the gallery and the cameras he had spent years feeding. "Everything Mr. Cole said is true. Everything Megan showed you is true. I shoved him because he was a janitor, and I thought janitors were furniture. His voice broke, and he let it. He never threw one punch at me. The third fall, I was going head first into concrete. He caught me. The man I was trying to ruin caught me. He faced Otis last. I picked June 14th for the fight. I didn't know what that date was. Now I do, and I can't give it back. He bowed, clumsy and unpracticed, the first honest bow of his life. I'm sorry, Mr. Foster. Otis studied him for a long moment and said nothing at all. Some apologies have to season before they're answered. The consequences arrived like dominoes that had been waiting politely in line. The State Athletic Commission reviewed the unedited footage and stripped Kyle's regional titles for conduct, the steel bottle alone ending the debate. His sponsors were gone by Friday. The supplement brand released a statement containing the word values 3 times. Preston Bennett fared worse. The city attorney opened an inquiry into the doctored video, and his partners, smelling weather, backed out of 2 downtown projects. The Ironclad board, suddenly brave, voted Troy Sullivan out before lunch on a Tuesday. He packed his frame check himself. Megan Brooks turned down 4 job offers from news stations and took 1 from a law office. 2 weeks later, the Ironclad board called Otis Foster into the office that used to ignore him. They offered him the head coaching position, full salary, his name on the wall. Otis listened with his hands folded. I'll take it, he said, on one condition. Tuesday and Thursday nights, the main mat belongs to the neighborhood. Free self-defense classes for every kid who walks in. No fees, no cuts. The board agreed before he finished. One more thing, Otis added. It has a name, the Caleb Foster Program. Nobody in the room argued with that. On the first night of the program, 32 children sat cross-legged on the main mat, the 9-year-old front and center. Otis walked in, carrying the wooden box and a hammer. First, he drove a small nail into the wall by the door and hung a photograph, face out, where it would watch every class. A boy of 19, grinning under a tournament banner, forever about to win. Then Otis opened the box in front of everyone, lifted out the old black belt, and tied it around his waist with hands that did not shake. 15 years of silence ended in 2 quiet knots. First lesson, he told the kids, voice carrying to the corners the way it used to. The strongest thing you will ever learn on this mat is how to walk away from a fight. The second strongest is how to make sure you can. 32 heads nodded like it was scripture. In the back, leaning on the doorframe, Mason Cole grinned at Sarah Whitfield. The quiet hand was loud again. He was halfway through teaching falls when the gym door opened. Kyle Bennett stood there in plain gray sweats, no logos, no entourage, no camera. The room went still. The children knew his face. Everyone in Ohio knew his face. Kyle crossed to the edge of the mat, stopped at the tape line like a man at a border, and bowed. Mr. Foster, teach me the right way. I'll start from nothing. Otis looked at him for a long, level moment. Then he pointed at the supply closet. Grab a mop first, he said. The floor teaches humility. Lesson 1 starts there. Kyle Bennett, former champion. $200,000 sponsorships, gone. Walked to the closet and picked up a mop in front of 32 children. And here is the strange part. Nobody laughed. The boy who had filmed an old man falling now moved a bucket in careful lines while the old man taught children how to stand. The internet would have called it content. The mat called it justice. 6 months later, on a cold Tuesday night in December, the lights of Ironclad burned warm against the dark. Through the front glass, you could see the main mat crowded with children, 60 of them now, in lines that started crooked in October and stood straight by Christmas. The Caleb Foster program had a waiting list. Then it had a second location. By spring, it would have 5, in 5 cities, each one opened by a phone call Otis never asked anyone to make. Mason taught Tuesdays in Columbus.
Sarah flew in once a month and taught falling, which she called the most honest skill on earth. Dominic paid every bill and refused every interview. Kyle Bennett was there every night, and he was easy to miss, which was new for him. He wore plain white, like every beginner. He had asked the commission not to expedite his appeal. He swept the mats before class and mopped them after, in long, even arcs that never crossed their own path, because he had asked the old man to show him how. His followers dwindled to 1/10 of what they were. He never posted again. Once, a reporter cornered him in the parking lot and asked if this was a redemption arc. Kyle thought about it. "No," he said. "It's just Tuesdays." Otis Foster still arrived at 5 in the morning. Some habits are load-bearing. He still read the floor while he walked it, still folded his rags in perfect thirds. But the photograph by the door faced out now, and he had started talking to it again. Small things, scores and stances, and which kid finally kept her chin down. On June 14th, the program held no classes. The mat stayed empty and the lights stayed on, one night a year, for a champion who never got to arrive. Nobody scheduled it. Everybody honored it. The 9-year-old, 10 now, earned his first stripe in November. When Otis tied it on, the boy whispered something only the two of them heard. Otis laughed, a real one, from the chest. Later, Megan asked him what the kid had said. The old man smiled and kept mopping a floor he no longer had to mop. Some things are between a coach and his fighter. That answer was the whole story, if you were listening. Troy Sullivan manages a storage facility on the south side now. Preston Bennett settled with the city attorney quietly, the way rich men do. But the towers stopped going up with his name on them. Power, it turns out, is also a floor. It only holds you while you respect it. People still stop Otis on the street and ask about the 60 seconds. They want to hear about the throws. He always tells them the same thing. The fight was never the point. For 9 years, a master swept floors in silence, and nobody asked his name. It took 60 seconds of violence to make the world curious about a man that 60 seconds of kindness would have revealed. Don't wait for the mat to find out who's standing next to you. So here's the question this story leaves behind. If you were Otis, standing in that puddle with 300 people laughing, would you have stepped onto the mat? Or would you have kept mopping? Tell us in the comments, because the answers say more about us than about him. If this story moved you, share it with someone who feels invisible at their job. They might need to hear that Worth doesn't wear a uniform. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one waiting, and we tell a new one every week.
Real talk. The reason I told this story is my grandpa worked maintenance 30 years, smartest man I ever met, and people talked to him like furniture. Somewhere out there is a janitor, a cashier, a nobody, carrying a whole legend quietly. Be the person who asks their name first.